it's all that preliminary stuff's actually really good, and I don't want to make light of it, but you guys came here for this part. But it's really important to have that background and know how to identify those drained wetlands, because yeah, it helps. So you get a call from the landowner, or you're up in your forestry block, or actually there's a lot of potentials around roads and stuff, putting wetlands alongside roads. You know, pre-visit, again, you know, go through all your stuff, landowner interviews. I sort of put a map together of a potential wetland, try to do it ahead of time. So when I'm sitting there with the landowner, I can pull that map out and say, you know, is this where you want your wetland to go? I just use either Google Maps or the walking access mapping system to do those things. Real simple and easy. You can do it in GIS if you have the skills. And there we go. So when I go out on the site visit, I carry a camera with me. I carry a camera with me all the time. All my cameras have GPS in them because I take so many photographs, I forget where they're taken. Unfortunately, Google changed they used to have Picasso. Picasso was linked to Google Maps, and you can just hit that and show you exactly where those photos are taken. But it's really nice to have those GPS camera. If you don't, it's not a big deal. It's just remember when you label it where you took those photographs from. I usually not that good. You know, clipboard's always good to have with things to take notes on. A spade or an auger, just to do a little bit of soil sampling, is ideal, so you know what you're getting into, what kind of soils you have, that kind of thing. You don't need it for the first visit, but laser levels come in really handy because you can lay it out real quick. You can see where the slope is. I got an app, a clinometer app on my phone, so I can actually look at what the slope is and use that just to get a rough estimate. It's not great, but it just gives you an idea. After you do it, a lot of times you're just like, yeah, this is this. But eyeballing, you know, again, you're always more wrong than possible. And you're like, oh yeah, that's flat. And then you get in there, it's like, oh, actually, it's quite a fall in there. Tile probes are quite handy. Next photograph, bottom photograph one. But you can't just go dump around with a tile probe. You actually got to look at where you think the tile is, and then just start probing with it. If you use a tile probe, know if there's any buried lines, or get a tile probe that's insulated so you don't hit a buried electric line and shock yourself, because it's a meter and plus metal rod with a sharp metal point. And so if you point, usually in rural areas, that's not an issue. Mine's not insulated because I was too cheap to buy an insulated one. But if you're in an urban area, yeah, tile probe, you know, post hole digger, or even a spade, an auger of some sort. If you have a digger on site, it's ideal because you can really get a good idea of the profile. You gotta watch though when you scoop out and look at the soil profile, you just make sure that the digger doesn't smear, especially if you get clay your profile. So sometimes you just take the spade and scrape that smeared off just to see what your soil profile is. Nice clay right there. Yeah, I usually take an auger with me and run it, but once you're in an area and you've done enough wetlands in one area, you almost know what to expect. It comes in. Real quick, natural layering of soils is actually really good to know, and this will come into practice when we talk about restoring wetland. But it will move now. It moves. Soils laid down in layers over time, and what happens is water moves through those layers. And later, when we're trying to restore hydrology, what we want to do is actually break those layers up, so we stop that water from going and push it up. And we'll talk about that later. But that's a really good show of what your soil layers are like. And that bottom layer of clay is a really heavy clay that's pretty much impermeable. Soil sampling is great. Basically, the only thing you need to know is it's silty, clay, or sand, or somewhere in between. You know, what we're looking for a lot of times is a clay. The more clay, the better. And the less sand, the better. So you want a silty, we can get away with the silty loam, with some stuff depending upon the catchment size, but really ideally for a lot of the work we need, good clay works great because clay's pretty much impermeable once you do it. So to determine clay content, you take your soil, and we're going to do that this afternoon. I've got bags of soil and collected some from around here yesterday. You get it moist and you squeeze it, and by what we call the thumb test, you squeeze it. And if you get it, I got to convert. It's 3 inches. What's 3 inches? 75 mil of without breaking. You've got a really good clay content. If you get a little less, it isn't. If it's sticky, and you can throw it to something that sticks to something, there's a silty loam in there, but there is a good bit of clay with that. Laser levels, we'll run laser levels this afternoon. Who knows how to use the laser level? I know these guys over here probably do. Use laser levels? Yep. They're better than dumpy levels because one person can run a laser level. The dumpy level, you need one person holding the post and one person, doing the things. Really, it helps us determine slope. It helps us determine what the depth of our water is. You'll pretty much grow attached to that as you go. Usually, 99.9% of the time, when you're building a wetland, your contractor has a laser level with them. That 0.01% I hit last year showed up. I don't have a laser. It's like, you're a contractor. Anyways, yeah. So, okay. Well, basically, now we got to decide what strategy we use. Are we going to use surface water to fill our wetland, or are we going to use groundwater to fill our wetlands? So there's a little key here, and I'll get Annette to put that key together for you. So if you dig a test hole and you sit there for a while and it fills up with water, that tells you you've got a groundwater table that's close to the surface. That way we can excavate a wetland and use that groundwater. Or if it's down a little ways, but you got good groundwater, we can actually pick that groundwater up, and we'll talk about that a little bit. If you do a test hole and it doesn't fill up with water, we've got to use surface water to fill that wetland. And when we go into surface level, surface water, we got to look at the clay content that you have. If you have high clay content, I got it, 5 centimeters or longer, when you squeeze it, you can build a wetland in a. Got that mixed up. Sorry about that. 5 centimeters or longer, you can build that wetland in a larger catchment. If it breaks off and has a little bit more silt and stuff, and you get 3 to 5 centimeters, you go smaller catchments. Like, no, I'm sorry, yeah, because this will leak. With the silt in there, you get more. You need more catchment to hold it. So it's a good rule of thumb. Although I've done small catchments with that with success. And it all depends upon what type of wetland. If you want a wetland with permanent water or ephemeral water, those decisions you make as you go. If you don't have soils that were high in clay and sandy soils and that kind of thing, you've got to go with a liner or haul clay in and line the whole thing with clay. We will not talk about liners today. If you're interested in using liners, we can have that conversation offline, and I can have that. It's a lot of technical stuff, but we use those liner systems for wetlands on schools and that kind of thing. Who's the environmental schools lady right there? So like a lot of wetlands that have been put in around schools and stuff, we use a liner to hold the water because we usually don't have good. The other thing is in urban areas, a lot of times you've got soils that are mixed because of all the construction and stuff like that. You just get rid of all that soil because it's not, how do I say, it's not constant across the ground when you dig it up. So if you're building in an urban area, you might want to bring your clay soil in from a good source. Another way is to tell if you need surface water, groundwater. If you got a pumping station nearby that tells you the groundwater is pretty high, and you can use groundwater for your wetland. Look at the levels of drains. It's not 100%, but if you're in a dry period and your drain water level is up this high, that's usually where your groundwater level is. So if you got in those drains a high water level, you can use groundwater to fill your wetland. Again, test pits. When you dig the test pits, give it a day to settle and go. Sometimes they fill up, depends what the substrate is. This one was a sandy substrate under peat, and it just right up. Sometimes it takes a few hours, but the next day usually it's stabilized. Again, look at your soil profile. A lot of times you find like that you have peat, but you got good clay underneath there, and sometimes you got to go down fairly deep to get into good clay. And you don't want a situation like this. There's good clay there, but it's all filled with river rock and cobble. You can't get really good compaction with it, and it will, you'll just get leaky through it. It's good to sit there and sketch a wetland out with the landowner so he knows what you want. You can, do we got any landscape developers or landscape architects here? Good. You get these, they're really good for helping us envision these things, but you can spend a lot of money on a landscape architect, where basically that's all you need to sit down with and say, hey, we want it in this shape, and you mark it out and that kind of thing. I'm building cheap. Most of the time I only got 5 to 10 grand. I can't afford landscape architects, so we draw it out, you know, put in root wads. This is like put in some topography, which we'll talk about, holes and mounds and some logs and stuff like that. And I just sit there with when I do wetlands, I'm there every time the digger's there, directing the digger, showing them what to do, and that kind of thing, because I know then I get a good product, and the digger operators appreciate it for the most part. And laying out the wetland, you can do that pre-site visit or site visit, or you can just do it right the day or two before the digger operator comes in. Flagging tape's great. I use 2 different color flagging tapes a lot of times. I'll put flagging tape around where I don't want him to excavate at all, and then another color where I want excavated. If you got high vegetation, it's nice. Sometimes flagging tape gets buried. It's just good reason why you're there too. So that's what I use for my pre-site visit, just to get up and going.